Her family was reunited with their dog after more than 2 years missing. Suddenly, they noticed something different about the dog. On his collar, there was an unusual chip from a military general. The secret that the dog now hid almost made them faint. Before hearing this true account, remember to subscribe to the channel for more exciting stories like this one. The afternoon sun painted the sky orange when Sarah heard a familiar bark echoing down the street. Her heart leaped in her chest, a mixture of hope and disbelief. It couldn't be or could it? Running to the window, she saw a furry, excited figure at the end of the street. "It can't be," she murmured, her hands trembling as she opened the front door. "Max!" The dog, a golden retriever, suddenly stopped. His ears perked up and his eyes fixed on Sarah. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Then, with a joyful bark, Max darted towards the house. Sarah fell to her knees, arms open wide, tears streaming down her face. "Max, oh my God, Max!" The dog jumped into her arms, frantically licking her face, his tail wagging so hard it looked like it might take off at any moment. Sarah buried her face in Max's soft fur, sobbing with joy. "Mom, Dad, come quick!" she cried, her voice choked with emotion. Hurried footsteps sounded inside the house, and soon John and Emily, Sarah's parents, appeared at the door, eyes wide with surprise. "It can't be," Emily whispered, bringing her hands to her mouth. John stood paralyzed for a moment, then ran to join his daughter and the dog. "Max, my boy, you're back!" The family huddled on the sidewalk, laughing and crying, hugging the golden retriever that had disappeared more than 2 years ago. Curious neighbors began to approach, drawn by the commotion. "It's a miracle!" exclaimed Mrs. Johnson, the next-door neighbor who had always been close to the family. "I prayed every day for his return." As the news spread quickly through the neighborhood, more and more people gathered to see the dog that had returned after so long. Max, for his part, seemed unconcerned with the extra attention, focusing only on covering his owners with licks and affection. "Where have you been all this time, huh, boy?" John asked, scratching behind Max's ears. It was then that Sarah noticed something different. "Dad, look at this," she said, pointing to Max's collar. "This isn't the collar he was wearing when he disappeared." John examined the black leather collar, noticing a small metallic object attached to it. It looks like a chip." "A chip?" Emily frowned. "But we never put a chip on him." The joy of the reunion was momentarily overshadowed by a wave of questions. Where had Max been all this time? Who had put that collar on him? And what did that chip mean? Before they could investigate further, the sound of an approaching patrol car caught everyone's attention. 2 city officials got out of the vehicle, their serious faces contrasting with the celebratory atmosphere. "Good afternoon," said one of the officials, approaching the family. "We received a report about a potentially dangerous dog at this address." The crowd of neighbors fell silent, and Sarah instinctively hugged Max tighter. "There must be some mistake," John said, stepping forward. "This is our dog, Max. He just came home after being missing for 2 years." The older officer, whose badge indicated the name Thompson, shook his head. "I'm sorry, sir, but we have an order to impound the animal. It has been identified as a dog trained for military purposes and may pose a risk to the community." Emily let out a muffled cry, and Sarah started crying again, this time out of fear and indignation. You can't take him," she shouted. "We just found him." The tension in the air was palpable. The neighbors began to murmur among themselves, some expressing outrage, others concern. Max, sensing his owner's anxiety, began to growl softly at the officers. It was at this moment that Mrs. Johnson stepped forward, her wrinkled face determined. "Officers," she said in a firm voice that surprised everyone, "are you aware that this property is part of a federal area?" The officers exchanged confused looks. "What do you mean, Ma'am?" "This land," continued Mrs. Johnson, pointing to the family's house, "is part of an old federal grant. The jurisdiction here is not municipal but federal." John, catching on, quickly added, "Exactly. And without a federal order, you have no authority to seize anything here, much less our dog." Officer Thompson looked disconcerted. He whispered something to his partner, who nodded and returned to the patrol car, presumably to verify the information. Tense minutes passed. Sarah wouldn't let go of Max, who was now calm, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. Finally, the other officer returned, speaking quietly with Thompson. With a frustrated sigh, Thompson addressed the family. "It appears you're correct about the jurisdiction. We can't act here without a federal order." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Sarah hugged Max tightly, tears of relief now streaming down her face. "However," Thompson continued, "we still have concerns about this animal's safety. We strongly recommend that you keep him under strict surveillance and seek a specialist to evaluate him." John nodded solemnly. "We'll do that, officer. Thank you for your understanding." As the officers withdrew, the tension in the street began to dissipate. Neighbors approached to offer words of comfort and support to the family. "Don't worry," said Mrs. Johnson, giving Emily a comforting pat on the shoulder. "We'll all keep an eye out and make sure no one takes Max from you again." The family profusely thanked everyone, especially Mrs. Johnson, for her quick intervention. As the neighbors slowly dispersed, John, Emily, and Sarah took Max inside the house, closing the door behind them. Seated in the living room, with Max contentedly lying at their feet, the family finally had a moment to process everything that had happened. "I can't believe it," said Emily, stroking Max's head. "After so long, and now this." John frowned thoughtfully. "Something very strange is going on here. That chip on the collar. And why would someone report Max as dangerous?" Sarah, who was examining the collar more closely, let out a surprised exclamation. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a small inscription engraved on the leather. "There's a name here, General A. Wilson." The family exchanged intrigued looks. Who was this General Wilson? And what role did he play in Max's mysterious journey? As the sun set outside, the family knew that Max's return was just the beginning of a much bigger story. A story full of mysteries, dangers, and above all, the unwavering power of love between a dog and his family. What they didn't know was that the surprises were just beginning, and that Max held secrets that would change their lives forever. The morning after Max's return, the family woke up early, still processing the surreal events of the previous day. The golden retriever slept peacefully at the foot of Sarah's bed, as if he had never left. John was the first to go downstairs, determined to investigate more about the mysterious chip on Max's collar. With a steaming cup of coffee in hand, he turned on the computer and began researching General A. Wilson. Emily joined him shortly after, bringing some toast. "Have you found anything?" John sighed, rubbing his tired eyes. "Not much. It seems there was a General Andrew Wilson who retired about 3 years ago. He was a respected officer, known for his work with military dogs, but I can't find any direct connection to Max." At that moment, Sarah came down the stairs, closely followed by Max. The dog seemed more alert than ever, his intelligent eyes observing every movement of the family. "Good morning," Sarah said, yawning. "What are you doing?" "Trying to unravel the mystery of our friend here," John replied, pointing to Max. "But it's not easy." Sarah knelt beside Max, examining the collar again. "You know, there's something strange about this chip. It doesn't look like a common identification microchip." John approached, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Look," Sarah pointed to the small device. "It's much more sophisticated. It almost looks like a mini computer or something." Emily frowned. "But why would someone put something like that on a dog?" Before anyone could answer, the doorbell rang, making everyone jump in surprise. Max immediately went on alert, his ears perked up and his body tense. John went to the door, cautious. When he opened it, he found himself face to face with a middle-aged man wearing an impeccable suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Good morning," the man said with a polite smile. "My name is Dr. Richard Parker. I'm a lawyer, and I represent the estate of the late General Andrew Wilson. I'm looking for a dog named Max. I believe he's with you?" The family exchanged looks of astonishment. How did this man know about Max? And what did General Wilson have to do with all this? John hesitated for a moment before answering. "Yes, Max is with us. He came back home yesterday after being missing for 2 years. But I don't understand. What do you want with him?" Dr. Parker smiled again. "May I come in? I have important information to share with you, and I believe it would be better to talk in private." Reluctantly, John gestured for the lawyer to enter. Emily and Sarah approached, while Max observed the newcomer with cautious curiosity. Once everyone was seated in the living room, Dr. Parker opened his briefcase and took out some documents. First, let me clarify that Max was not stolen from you, he began. General Wilson found him wandering the streets injured and malnourished almost 2 years ago. He cared for Max, fed him and trained him. Sarah interrupted, her voice trembling with emotion. But why didn't he try to find us? Max had a collar with our address. The lawyer nodded understandingly. The general tried, but the collar was badly damaged and the address was illegible. He contacted shelters and veterinarians in the area, but no one had information about a lost golden retriever that matched Max's description. The family fell silent, absorbing the information. John was the first to speak. And what happened after that? Why did Max come back now? Dr. Parker took a deep breath before continuing. Unfortunately, General Wilson passed away a month ago. In his will, he left specific instructions about Max. He wanted the dog to have a chance to find his original family if possible. But what about the chip? Asked Emily. And why did the city officials want to take him yesterday? The lawyer looked surprised. Officials? I have no knowledge of any order to impound Max. As for the chip, it's advanced technology developed by the general himself. He trained Max for special missions. Special missions? Sarah repeated, incredulous. What kind of missions? Doctor. Parker hesitated for a moment. General Wilson was involved in a secret program training dogs for highly specialized search and rescue operations. Max proved to be exceptionally talented and received advanced training. The family was speechless. Their beloved golden retriever, an elite canine agent. It seemed like something out of a spy movie. There's one more thing, continued the lawyer, pulling more papers from his briefcase. The general left a substantial amount in Max's name. An account for his care and a donation fund for animal rescue. John almost choked on his coffee. A substantial amount? How much exactly? $5 million, Dr. Parker calmly replied. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah hugged Max instinctively, as if fearing someone might try to take him away again. And what happens now? Asked Emily, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Parker smiled gently. Now, the decision is yours. The general wanted Max to have the option to stay with his original family, if found, but he also left resources for Max to continue his search and rescue work, if you so desired. The family exchanged looks, a mixture of emotions passing over their faces. Joy at Max's return, confusion about his secret past, and now the responsibility of a decision that could change their lives forever. Max, oblivious to the complexity of the situation, approached Sarah and put his head on her lap, his eyes full of love and trust. We need time, John finally said. It's a lot to process. Dr. Parker nodded understandingly. Of course, here's my card. Please contact me when you've made a decision, and don't worry, Max is safe here. I'll make sure no one else tries to take him. As the lawyer prepared to leave, Sarah couldn't help but ask, Dr. Parker, did you know General Wilson well? The lawyer paused for a moment, a distant look in his eyes. Yes, I knew him. He was a remarkable man, dedicated to saving lives, and he loved Max as if he were his own child. With those words, Dr. Parker said goodbye, leaving the family deep in thought. As the door closed, they looked at Max, who was now sleeping peacefully on the living room rug. Their dog had returned, but with him came secrets, responsibilities, and decisions they never imagined they'd have to face. The life they knew was about to change drastically, all because of a golden retriever with an extraordinary past. As the day progressed, the family knew they would need to make difficult decisions, but for now they were grateful to have Max back, regardless of the mysteries surrounding him. What they didn't know was that Max's true abilities were yet to be revealed, and that their lives were about to become much more exciting and dangerous than they could ever imagine. In the weeks that followed Dr. Parker's visit, the family tried to resume their normal routine, but Max's presence brought a new dynamic to the house. The golden retriever, though loving and playful as always, occasionally exhibited behaviors that intrigued his owners. One Saturday morning, Sarah decided to take Max for a walk in the park near their house. The day was sunny, perfect for a stroll. As they walked along the wooded trail, Sarah noticed how Max seemed more attentive than usual, his ears constantly moving, catching every sound. Suddenly, Max stopped, becoming completely still. his eyes fixed on a distant point, and a low growl escaped his throat. "What is it, boy?" Sarah asked, looking in the same direction but seeing nothing unusual. Without warning, Max darted off, pulling Sarah with such force that she almost lost her balance. "Max, wait!" The dog ran as if his life depended on it, guiding Sarah off the main trail and towards a small creek. It was then that she heard it, a faint cry, almost drowned out by the sound of running water. As they approached the bank, Sarah saw with horror a small child, no more than 5 years old, being dragged by the current. Without hesitation, Max jumped into the water. "Oh my God!" Sarah shouted, running along the creek bank trying to keep up with Max. The golden retriever swam with impressive precision, cutting through the turbulent waters as if he had done this hundreds of times before. In a few seconds, he reached the child, gently grabbing their shirt with his teeth. With calculated movements, Max began to swim back to the shore, pulling the child with him. Sarah watched, mouth agape at the skill and strength with which her dog maneuvered against the current. As soon as they got close enough, Sarah waded into the shallow water to help. Together, she and Max brought the child to the safety of the shore. "Are you okay?" Sarah asked, checking on the shivering child in her arms. The child coughed, expelling some water, but nodded weakly. "Thank you," they whispered, hugging Max, who was shaking himself off beside them. It wasn't long before the desperate cries of the child's parents were heard. They ran towards the group, tears of relief streaming down their faces as they saw their child safe. "Lily! Oh my God, Lily!" exclaimed the mother, hugging her daughter tightly. The father, still pale with worry, looked at Sarah and Max. You saved our daughter. How can we ever thank you?" Sarah, still processing what had happened, smiled shyly. It was Max who did all the work. He found her and got her out of the water. The parents looked at the golden retriever with admiration. Lily, already feeling better, patted Max's wet head. "He's a hero," she said, smiling. While the paramedics, who had been called by other park-goers, examined Lily, Sarah couldn't take her eyes off Max. Dr. Parker's words echoed in her mind. Advanced training, special missions. Back at home, Sarah reported the incident to her parents, who listened with a mixture of pride and amazement. "It's incredible," John said, scratching behind Max's ears. "He not only found the girl, but knew exactly how to rescue her safely." Emily, who had been tense throughout the entire narrative, finally relaxed. "I think I now understand why General Wilson invested so much in him. Max isn't just a dog, he's a true lifesaver." In the days that followed, news of the rescue spread quickly through the neighborhood and beyond. Local journalists appeared, wanting to interview the family about their hero dog. Max, oblivious to the commotion he was causing, continued his day-to-day life, asking for affection and playtime like any ordinary dog. But the family knew that nothing would be ordinary in their lives anymore. The incident at the park was just the beginning. A week later, Max alerted the family to a gas leak in the kitchen, potentially preventing a tragedy. On another occasion, he prevented a delivery man, who they later discovered had a criminal record, from entering the house when Sarah was alone. Each new event only confirmed what Dr. Parker had said. Max was extraordinary. His training went far beyond simple tricks. He possessed skills that could save lives. The family found themselves faced with a dilemma. On one hand, they had their beloved pet back, the family member they had lost for so long. On the other hand, they now understood that Max had the potential to make a difference in many people's lives. One night while having dinner, John finally expressed what everyone was thinking. Maybe we should consider allowing Max to continue his search and rescue work." Sarah dropped her fork, looking at her father with a mixture of surprise and apprehension. "But what if we lose him again?" Emily took her daughter's hand, squeezing it gently. "Honey, after everything we've seen, I think Max will always find his way back to us. Besides, think of how many lives he could save." The discussion extended late into the night. They weighed the pros and cons, considered all possibilities. Max, lying at the feet of the table, watched the family with his intelligent eyes, as if understanding every word. Finally, they reached a decision. The next morning, Sarah picked up the card Dr. Parker had left and dialed the number. "Dr. Parker, this is Sarah, Max's owner. We "We've made a decision." On the other end of the line, the lawyer listened attentively as Sarah explained what the family had decided. When she finished, there was a moment of silence before he responded, "I understand. Well, it seems we have a lot of work ahead of us. What would you say to a meeting tomorrow to discuss the next steps?" Sarah looked at Max, who was now by her side, his tail wagging as if he knew a new adventure was about to begin. "Yes," she replied, a smile forming on her lips. "I think we're ready for whatever comes." As she hung up the phone, Sarah couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Life as they knew it was about to change, drastically. But with Max by their side, they felt they could face any challenge. What they didn't know was that the real tests were yet to come. The world was about to learn about Max's extraordinary abilities, and not everyone would be happy about it. Adventures, dangers, and surprising revelations awaited the family and their special dog. As the sun set that day, casting long shadows across the living room, Max snuggled between his owners on the couch. For now he was just a beloved dog, enjoying the warmth of his family. But soon he would become much more, a symbol of hope, courage, and the incredible bond between humans and their canine companions. Winter arrived with unexpected ferocity, bringing snowstorms that paralyzed much of the region. For Max and his family, this meant a significant increase in rescue missions. One particularly cold morning, the phone rang. It was Captain Anderson from the search and rescue team. "We have a critical situation," he said, his voice tense. "A school bus went off the road in the mountains during a blizzard. We're having difficulties locating it due to the extreme weather conditions. We need Max." Without hesitation, Sarah and Max prepared for the mission. Max's new technological collar was activated, its sensors calibrated for the extreme conditions they would face. Arriving at the operation site, the gravity of the situation became clear. Visibility was almost zero, and the wind howled mercilessly. Frustrated and worried rescue teams scoured the area without success. "Our last information is that the bus had 20 children and 2 adults on board," Captain Anderson informed them. "It's been almost 12 hours since the last contact. Time is against us." Sarah knelt beside Max, looking into the dog's eyes. "I know it's asking a lot, buddy, but we need you now more than ever." Max responded with a determined bark, as if he perfectly understood the importance of the mission. With Max in the lead, the rescue team entered the storm. The biting wind and dense snow made progress difficult, but Max pressed on tirelessly, his enhanced senses scanning for any sign of life. After what seemed like an eternity fighting against the elements, Max stopped abruptly, his ears perking up in alert. He barked once, twice, and then began to dig in the snow. "He found something," Sarah shouted, her voice almost lost in the howling wind. The rescue team quickly joined Max, digging frantically. Soon the top of a yellow bus emerged from the snow. Muffled screams could be heard from inside. "We're here," came a weak cry from inside the bus. "Please help us." The next few hours were a blur of frantic activity. Rescuers worked tirelessly to open the bus and remove the children and adults. Max moved among the survivors, his collar device providing vital information about each person's condition. "This one has severe hypothermia," Sarah yelled, translating Max's device readings. "We need immediate medical attention." Thanks to the accurate information provided by Max, the medical team was able to prioritize the most urgent cases, potentially saving lives that could have been lost without this rapid intervention. As the last survivor was removed from the bus and taken for treatment, a feeling of relief and triumph swept over the rescue team. Max, exhausted but visibly proud, received emotional hugs and thanks from everyone present. The return to town was met with unprecedented commotion. Crowds gathered to applaud Max and the rescue team. Journalists jostled to get interviews, and social media exploded with stories about the technological hero dog who had saved a bus full of children. In the days that followed, Max's story gained international proportions. Interview requests came from all over the world, and offers to use Max's technology in various applications flooded the family's mailbox. Amidst all this attention, Sarah noticed that Max seemed more tired than usual. He slept more, and sometimes seemed reluctant to use his technological collar. Worried, she took him for a complete checkup with the veterinarian. "Physically, he's fine," said the vet after a series of examinations. But animals, like humans, can suffer from stress and exhaustion. Max has been under immense pressure. He needs rest and perhaps some time away from the spotlight. The family gathered to discuss the situation. It was clear that, although Max had accomplished incredible feats, the weight of being a hero was beginning to affect him. "Maybe it's time to take a step back," Emily gently suggested. "Let Max just be a dog for a while." John agreed. "He's already done more than we could have imagined. Maybe it's our turn to protect him, as he has protected us." The decision wasn't easy, but the family knew it was the right thing to do. They announced that Max would be temporarily stepping away from rescue missions for a well-deserved rest period. The news was met with understanding by most, although some expressed disappointment. Dr. Parker fully supported the decision, emphasizing the importance of Max's well-being above all else. In the weeks that followed, Max gradually returned to being just a pet dog. Long walks in the park, playing in the backyard, and lazy naps on the couch became his new routine. Slowly, the spark in his eyes, which had dimmed a bit, began to return. One afternoon, while playing with Max in the backyard, Sarah realized something important. "You know, boy," she said, scratching behind Max's ears. "You don't need a special collar or superpowers to be a hero. You're already special exactly as you are." Max responded with a happy bark and a lick to Sarah's face, as if agreeing. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, with Max comfortably lying at their feet, they reflected on the incredible journey they had lived. "I think we've learned a valuable lesson," John said. "Sometimes the most heroic thing we can do is know when to stop and take care of each other." Sarah smiled, looking at Max. "And maybe Max's true superpower has always been his ability to bring us together and remind us of what really matters." As night fell outside, the family cuddled together, grateful for each other's presence and for the unconditional love of their extraordinary dog. They didn't know what the future held, but they were certain of one thing. They would face it together, with Max by their side, not as a superhero, but as a beloved member of the family. And for Max, lying contentedly among his loved ones, that was more than enough. He had found his true home and his true purpose, to love and be loved, with or without a special collar. 2 years passed since Max stepped away from the spotlight. The family's life had found a new balance, calmer and more centered. Max, now with a few white strands mixed into his golden fur, seemed happier and more relaxed than ever. On a sunny spring morning, Sarah decided to take Max for a walk in the park where it all began. As they walked along the familiar trails, she reflected on everything they had been through. Suddenly, Max stopped, his ears perking up in alert. Sarah, instantly attentive, looked around. "What is it, boy?" she asked, adrenaline rushing through her veins, reminding her of the days of rescue missions. Max barked once and ran towards a group of nearby trees. Sarah followed him, her heart racing. As they approached, she saw a young man sitting alone on a bench, looking deeply distressed. Max gently approached the young man, placing his head on his lap. The young man, surprised, looked at the dog and then at Sarah. "Hi," Sarah said softly. "Is everything okay?" The young man hesitated for a moment before answering. I don't know. I don't think so." Sarah sat down next to him, with Max still offering silent comfort. "Want to talk about it?" In the minutes that followed, the young man, who introduced himself as Jake, opened up. He talked about pressure at school, problems at home, and an overwhelming feeling that he had nowhere to go or no one to talk to. Sarah listened attentively, occasionally offering words of comfort. Max remained by Jake's side, as if he understood exactly what he needed. "You know," Sarah said after Jake finished, "a few years ago, we thought Max here was a superhero. He did incredible things, saved lives. But you know what we discovered? That his greatest superpower was always his ability to be present, to offer comfort and unconditional love when we need it most." Jake looked at Max, a small smile forming on his lips. "He seems really special." "He is," Sarah agreed. "And you know what? We all have a bit of that superpower inside us. Sometimes, all we need is someone to remind us of that." They talked for a while longer. Sarah shared information about support groups and resources that could help Jake. When they finally said goodbye, the young man seemed lighter, more hopeful. "Thank you," he said, petting Max one last time. "You too? Well, I think you saved my life today." As Jake walked away, Sarah felt a wave of emotion. She knelt beside Max, hugging him tightly. "You never stop being a hero, do you, boy?" she whispered. That night, Sarah shared the incident with her family. They discussed at length how they could use their experiences and Max's fame in a more sustainable and impactful way. In the weeks that followed, an idea began to take shape. With the help of Dr. Parker and Augusto, they developed a plan to create a foundation. The goal? To train dogs to offer emotional support in schools, hospitals, and underprivileged communities. The Max Foundation, as it was called, quickly gained support. The story of the hero dog, who was now helping to train other dogs to offer comfort and emotional support, captured the public's imagination. Sarah became the foundation's spokesperson, sharing her experience and Max's journey to inspire others. John and Emily got involved in the administration, ensuring that the family's values were at the heart of every decision. And Max? He became the perfect ambassador. Although he no longer participated in dangerous rescue missions, he regularly visited schools and hospitals, bringing joy and comfort wherever he went. 1 year after the foundation's inception, Sarah was again in the park with Max. This time, they were surrounded by a dozen other dogs and their trainers, all part of the Max Foundation program. Watching the dogs interact with children and adults, offering silent comfort and unconditional love, Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "Look at this boy," she said to Max, who was sitting beside her, observing the scene with wise eyes. "You not only changed our lives, but you're helping to change the lives of so many others." Max looked at her, his eyes full of love and understanding. He may no longer have a high-tech collar or participate in spectacular rescues, but his impact on the world was greater than ever. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, with Max comfortably lying at their feet, they reflected on the incredible journey they had lived. "You know," John said, raising his glass in a toast, "when Max came back to us after so long, we thought it was the end of a story, but really it was just the beginning." Emily smiled, nodding. "And what a wonderful story it has been."